I'm sweating here. Yep, that's summer to you guys. And gotta say that the last couple of weeks were kind of quite eventful. I had fear, happiness, sadness, a lot of emotions came to me last week. Get this because I'm gonna talk about Inside Out too, right? And yeah, it's coincidental, just in case. I did have a kind of like a stupor of emotions that some of them, like for example, I can share you is kind of like, for example, I had I gotta say, I went to the dentist, which terrifies me. I, uh, I did have kind of like a jokey side on while showing a movie to some couple of colleagues. I I felt disgusted on some things that are on the news. I also I felt I also how can I say there was I got angry with some other issues, and also I felt sadness. I felt some sadness about a hole that was punching my heart. And but don't worry. Also, I got joy because last week I went there. Yep, I went to the Sonic Symphony World Tour that was near the city that I got. It was a lot of fun. The show was fantastic. I'm not gonna lie. It's a million times better than that awful show named Knuckles or slash The Wade Show. The Wade Show. So there you go. This is my sign of disgust in one of those. Yeah, but yeah. But other than that, it when it's about fear and sadness combined, I am also aware about the state of movies nowadays. Some movies are closing, and this summer wasn't some they didn't have the money and the box office hits that they all wanted. Trust me that I did wanted to plan to go watch The Watchers. Maybe I might do it when I get some free time, but I didn't. Just I want to also let you know that I also did wanted to watch Furiosa, but certain circumstances happened, and honestly, maybe because I was more familiar with Garfield than Mad Max. This is why I chose the Garfield movie more than Furiosa. So so honestly, I am a little bit to blame if that movie is kind of bomb at the box office. I'm gonna take responsibility for that. Either way, let's go back with the monster known as Disney, in which you can tell right now I am kind of like this hard relationship with Disney, considering that the last couple of movies there were kind of like not very good, and their practices are getting worse and worse and worse and worse. Rest in peace, Star Wars, just in case. Don't worry, I haven't watched the Elephant in the Room. I don't even plan it. Star Wars died for me years ago, ever since Rise of Skywalker. Sorry about that. I also had the emotion of sickness this week because I had to get over a nasty cold. But anyway, when it's about Pixar, I do have. I already said that there are some movies that I did like, some movies I really dislike. Also, this year it wasn't going kind of like very well. Even and Pixar is also aware that some of the Disney practices are basically killing the industry. It's so much that this year they even tried, and I mean they tried, to try to get some money by putting in the 3 Pixar movies that they didn't make it up on the big screen, to make it up for the COVID thing. The problem is that of all those 3 Pixar movies, only one of them was legitimately good. And of course, the movie that I'm talking about is Luca. Luca was actually the only good one for all those the other 2 movies. Say what you will about Soul, but Soul was, the more I thought about it, it was more pretentious than it ought to be. And of course, Turning Red is up to this day the Pixar movie I hate the most. I freaking hate Turning Red. I still, to this day, I do consider Turning Red worse than Cars 2. And I haven't even watched Cars 2, and I didn't even like the Cars franchise. I even thought I only saw the first movie, just that. But when it is about Inside Out is still considered kind of like the movie that brought Pixar back a little bit on its feet, because it was during that time that it was struggling to get a kind of like a hit similar to Toy Story, and in a way it did. But the more I thought about Inside Out, and even the first time I watched it, I gave it kind of like a little bit of kind of like a quote unquote affectionate nickname that I don't know if it's gonna sit well or something like that. And that is that instead of calling it Inside Out, I call it White People Problems, the movie. I know, it sounds a little bit colorful, but hear me out. The reason I call it White People Problems, the movie, is because Inside Out is trying to reach on the emotions of a little girl that it was kind of like a little bit too perfect, and her problems is kind of like more like the problems that children with a good economy or a good probably have, right? And the problems are, well, very kind of like insignificant and doesn't have high stakes and all this stuff. I mean, like for example, oh boo hoo, you're moving to a new place. Oh boo hoo, you have a kind of like a bad grade. Oh boo hoo, oh boo hoo, you're not happy. You're not happy even though you have very good nails. You're pretty. Your parents love you. You have everything. You have come on like almost everything. Is basically it's kind of like I know that it's kind of like showcasing the kids kind of like growing up, but it's kind of like in the most generic family friendly environment that you can think of on anything. It's not like, for example, you kind of give some kind of three-dimensionality to the character. Like, for example, hey, this character has kind of like this, have this mental problem, or she kind of lose a leg, let's say, or it is kind of like a kid growing up on a country that is pressured by war or poverty or something like that. I know that I am talking kind of like big social issues that can, although keep in mind that the social issues, political issues, it also can affect the emotion of an individual. The best example that is actually the precursor of Inside Out, which is actually a World War II Disney propaganda, which is called Reason and Emotion, which is basically kind of like a more simplified version of Inside Out. But this one touches a little bit more than that. And even though almost at the end they does put some kind of World War II propaganda, it's still the idea is it can talk to you as a whole, and it was easy to understand. Inside Out, yeah, I even though I'm kind of nitpicking this aspect, It just call it kind of like a nitpick of someone that is very picky on the whole stuff, and sometimes I like to push some things a little bit far. But that's not saying that I didn't hate Inside Out. No, I do agree that there's some that sometimes it brings out some questions than answer than when you kind of think about it here and there. But then came the trailer of Inside Out 2. And considering the state that Disney is because of some invaders here and there, I gotta admit that I made a bet. I was making a bet in which I was gonna donate $5 to anything if, and only if the main character Riley, she was gonna end up becoming a lesbian. And by the way, do you blame me? Because the whole trailer kind of felt like it was pushing into that direction. It was pushing it into that. So, but I was rolling my eye up like, oh, here we go again with all that annoyance thing. But then some other friends told me that no, she's not like that. I mean, you saw that there's this short film with that I haven't seen in which she has a date or something like that. I don't know, but still, I was like, I was kind of like, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. So I went there and I was kind of like having my $5 ready, to give some kind of donation to anything if Riley's gonna end up, end up, as a lesbian, because the trailer kind of showcased like that. So don't blame me. Blame what the trailer kind of implied to. Sorry about that. Some people are talking, on the apartment, all that stuff. Ignore that. But other than that, there were also some kind of, how can I say, things on the trailer that I was kind of like rolling my eyes. I was kind of a little bit skeptical in one way or another. But oh wow, you know what? Not only is people talking outside. Apparently it's raining. I heard a thunderstorm. Apparently no one wants me to talk about this movie. Well, too bad, because here it is. I do have something to say about Inside Out 2. And that is, well, it's actually good. I gotta say, is kind of a little bit of an improvement over the other Pixar movies. Although I like it a little bit less than Luca, if I have to make a comparison with the other movies. And honestly, I was kind of, since the movie is about they're going into their teens, I was worried that it was gonna be as awfully obnoxious like Turning Red. Luckily, it didn't go that way. And actually, it make up some good stuff. More that it was done better than Turning Red. So I leave it kind of like as it is. But it was good. But unfortunately, I gotta say that it wasn't exactly perfect. There are some things that I do have kind of like a bone to pick up, but in its way, it's in itself harmless. It was harmless enough to not go into this. It's still white people problems. The movie keeps the mantle of being called white people problems too. Is not gonna be about a character that its emotions is gonna be on an environment of poverty or war or let's put it something a little bit less harsh, like for example divorce or bullying. Bullying can affect also these emotions, or how about what else comes into my mind? Well, there is a little bit, peer pressure. This movie also has a little bit, kind of a bit of peer pressure. Although this is something that this is kind of like a plot that you see almost in a lot of these cartoons. So it's kind of like an overused plot that you see in a lot of times when you see a lot of those cartoons. So it's not the most original plot that you could ever be. But again, like I said, as long as it's done well, it can do well. I'm gonna go kind of like half and half. I know that many people are gonna say that, wow, this is good or something like that, but I usually kind of put a little bit of tough love into Disney, in which honestly I think that this movie could have benefit if we didn't focus the attention on Riley. Instead of, we should have focused the attention of another character, which I'll get into it. So I think I got ahead on saying too much about it. So let's start out. The usual synopsis about the movie. And the movie, of course, is kind of this self-proclaimed instructional video that it showcases that people have emotion. When we grew up, emotions, they just grow up, and they anthropomorphize the emotions. And while the main emotions that we introduced ever since the first movie, of course, joy, sadness, fear, anger, and disgust. Although they trying to simplify it a little bit too much, because honestly the world the human mind has more emotions than you could ever imagine, and well, this movie is what it tries to do. That was kind of like the problem that I have a little bit with the first movie, but again, they tried to simplify it at the best way as possible. If you remember, the first white people problem that the first movie had is a character dealing with moving away, and now we got the second white people problem that the movie had, is that in this case the main protagonist Riley, she turned her 13, she get her braces, and well, the thing is that during that time, she's now kind of like in middle school. She become friends with other two girls, because they find out that they get along. They form their group of friends, and they have a lot in common because, well, they like some good stuff. They share good stuff, and of course they play hockey, and they play hockey. So the movie, a big conflict comes when while Riley and her friends, they're going kind of like in a 3-day what was it, 3-day kind of like a hockey camp where they're gonna play hockey and all this stuff. And they let's say that Riley receives the news that her two best friends, they're gonna move into another high school. So so that makes her sad. And then at the same time, Riley wants to fit in with a group of, how can I say, a group of high schoolers also, that they're also in the summer camp. That they're kind of like the cool gang, and there's kind of like this girl that she admires and have this girl crush. See where the homosexual thing it happened in the movie that I was suspecting. Well, don't blame me. The movie actually kind of unintentionally kind of do it, or maybe it was, I don't know. But anyway, because this is where Riley begins to showcase her first emotions of, how can I say, that comes in their teenage 13 years old. And so the old emotions, they have to welcome the new emotions. One of them is kind of like this big fat pink guy named Embarrassment. There's this little wide-eyed little girl. Her name is Envy. There's another one who's kind of like laid back and lazy. She's known as Inui, which is kind of like a scientific term for how can I say, boredom. And of course the movie, the one that they try to cram it into her mouth. the new emotion known as anxiety. And the first time I saw anxiety, I was in my head. It was she's basically Pixar's version of Pepe Prawn from the Muppets. Because look at her, she looks like it. Anxiety looks like Pepe Prawn from the Muppets. The only thing missing is with her talking in a stereotypical Spanish language. Although that will make it even more funny. But the whole thing is that because of the emotional peer pressure that Riley begins to showcase, this is where when her anxiety decides to take over, because she's like, oh, what is things gonna happen? What is things? She's gonna prepare for all these things, so she decides to take over the controls and then bottle the other emotions, literally, because I'll get to that just in case. And then they send them away alongside kind of like a main core that Riley had, which is technically herself. What was it? What was it? Her own emotion, her self-worth, in which it's kind of like a core that says that she's a good person and all that stuff. I'm sorry, some things kind of escape me from here and there, but basically the main gist is that the old emotions now they have to get back to the control room in order to stop anxiety from fumbling things up, because the uncontrolled anxiety that is giving Riley is not only affecting her friendship with other people, but also her own self and all this stuff. And well, it's not exactly kind of like a bad plot, although you haven't seen something like that, but there's some things about the execution of the movie that it kind of questions some things. Maybe I am over analyzing, but here's some of the things that I gotta say. I think that honestly, we all know some, the old emotions. And of course we got that the main emotion that carries the whole movie is joy. And just like the first movie, Joy was kind of a little bit kind of like a love-hate relationship, because her optimism sometimes comes off kind of like annoying. And I was like, woman, just please, not everything has to be happy. I'm kind of glad that they kind of explore in this movie, and well, she's kind of a little bit like that, but thankfully they made this character kind of like aware enough that not everything has to be joyful and all this stuff. It's just everything has to be everything's kind of like a moderation of emotions. Of course, we got sadness, which is kind of like the most rational one. There's also fear, who is kind of like the cautious one. Disgust, which is kind of like the diva that go like and of course anger. Anger probably is kind of like my favorite character, because he does come up with some of the snarkiest response to almost everything. But here's kind of like the biggest question that I do have, and this is kind of like harms the believability of the movie, is that why there is a mixture of genders on Riley's emotions, because we see kind of like the perspective of a brief perspective of some other characters' emotions, and when we see the perspective of other characters, everyone has kind of like their different genders, their specific genders. Like for example, in the last movie, when we see the gender of the emotions in the mother, all of them were female. To the father, everyone are male, so there's no mixture. So why Riley specifically has a mixture of emotions with a specific gender? So this, unless they kind of try to specify that Riley is kind of a little bit of a tomboy, but that's just more kind of like speculation instead of kind of like a concrete answer that they give. And well, in the case of the new emotions, well, let's say that let's say that anxiety is the one that takes over most of the whole movie because, well, she basically is the one that they turn into the main antagonist. And although in a way, I kind of just wanted to know, and this is kind of another debate: is anxiety considered an emotion? I was actually speculating that mostly that because I didn't consider anxiety as a separate emotion, but more like a combination of a state of being. Let's say that when your anxiety is when your fears are kind of like elevated, or you're elevated to a higher standard of joy. Let's say, like for example, I mentioned or something like that. So there is kind of like a fear. There's it's more like a fear or sort of excited. And this is kind of like I find it kind of like a state of being instead of like kind of like a separate emotion. Although I can get with envy. Also, I don't know why envy they kind of showcase it kind of like in a positive way, considering that well she's kind of like a secondary antagonist, but I don't think. But this is kind of like, well, let's say there's a negative emotion that we have. Honestly, they should. In a way, also it just kind of there. But of the favorite emotions, I gotta say that embarrassment is kind of like the most likable of the one because this one is kind of showcase some positive traits that honestly I'm not gonna spoil too much. But let's say that of all these characters, embarrassment is the one that showcases some positive streaks. But then now let me talk about the character that is the focus of, which is Riley. And from the first get-go, even from the first movie and this one or the second movie, here I gotta consider that Riley is probably one of my top 10 least favorite characters on any Pixar movie, because when you think about it, Riley is not exactly that interesting. She is basically a Mary Sue, because she is kind of like, here's the problem that I have with her. She's almost perfect. She's almost like the perfect little girl, the perfect girl that you can imagine. She's a girl with good notes. She has a healthy relationship with her parents. She nothing. Almost, she's good at sports. Almost like nothing. She's basically Kim Possible, but without the the badass stuff. And there's almost she's kind of like not interesting, and you can tell that this is a character that I don't know. It's hard for me to to appreciate, because of going back. She is basically the character that is just white people problems. Yeah, I'm being harsh, but that is the point of the movie. It doesn't want to going over going as far because they wanted to make it kind of like a family friendly environment. They don't want it to go. They don't want it to politicize the whole thing or socialize the whole thing, But if you're going into emotions, again, I really speculate that there are many aspects that can affect emotions. Emotions are not exactly, how can I say, the 100% 100% guaranteed here and there. And I gotta say that here's another. This movie, it made me like Riley even less. But it's mostly because how they treat her. Because honestly, gotta say, here's the thing: the whole movie, it kind of treats that the emotions, they kind of control the human, like that and all this stuff. But then the way the movie it treats it, I was beginning to convince that Riley is not a human being. She's a robot. Riley, the whole movie, she acts like a total robot. She's a slave, kind of like her emotion, because there's someone, I know this is unintentional, but whenever they push her kind of like a button, Riley's like, hey, she kind of begins to overact. She doesn't, and considering the whole environment of other people, Riley is kind of like the only person who begins to act like she had a short circuit. circle, and like, yeah, she overacts almost the whole moment, and I don't know why everyone is like, Riley, what is wrong with you? So she acts like a machine during the whole movie, an overacting machine, and honestly, that takes her out the humanity out of her. At least the first movie, it kind of makes her act a little bit subtle, but this one, my God, how they make her act like an overacting machine, and the way, and sometimes when she acts, like kind of like over the top, it's kind of like annoying and kind of embarrassing. Luckily, it's not as bad as the annoyance of the teenagers in turning red. Those are obnoxious. Those are obnoxious. But having Riley act, like a robot, an emotional robot, it kind of rubs me a little bit in an unintentional wrong way. But also for the benefit of the movie, Riley, she turns out into one of the biggest jerks in Pixar history. She kind of hits herself, turns into a little bit kind of like the bad guy. And when she turns into a jerk, she's unlikable. She turned into an asshole, and it's mostly because the emotions are kind of pushing her. Her relationship with the other characters, and honestly, here's also the thing that I have a problem with the movie, and I know that they didn't want it to go there, but the people surrounding Riley, they're also not that interesting, because they're also kind of like there, to fulfill the narrative. Like the girl she has her quote unquote crush on. I wanted her to the movie wanted her to kind of become kind of like the bad guy, that she's the leader of the group and all this stuff, that it kind of peer pressuring to being like that. But well, it doesn't do that because the movie wanted to play nice and luckily they kind of toned down that character because the trailer didn't make it justice, and it really felt like Riley and that girl. What was the name of that character in which it's saying? You know what? I don't remember. She was basically the trailer kind of made it like that Riley is kind of like a boner on her. And well, the other friends, let's say that they're also not that interesting. They're just kind of like the good friends, like they hang with each other and all this stuff. Now they have to they separate, and they're always kind of like together, and they're kind of looking at Riley as like, hey, you got a problem with that? And even when when Riley did some despicable things to them, they are a little bit too good natured, and they don't act kind of like humans. And let's say that because humans can be selfish, they can hold a grudge, and they're not easy to do that. But the movie kind of played the nice card, and even when the climax of the movie, I kind of predicted the whole thing, and it didn't have too much the teeth into it. And funny thing that I'm mostly talking about the characters that I have kind of like the problem into it. Although don't get me wrong. That necessarily means that it harms the movie, because at least it fulfills a bit. How can I say, the narrative that is kind of like it's basically a negative emotion taking over, going out of control, and honestly, the movie kind of also wanted to explore that there is kind of like a duality on a person, in which a person that is kind of like too perfect. She kind of believes that she's a good person, but finds out that but then finds out that they're making bad decisions, and because I'll get to that in the scene. I'm getting ahead of myself, and to jump things quietly, no point to talk about animation. The animation is obviously good. No, this is a free gimme and all this stuff. Oh yeah, and I also gotta mention that there are a few things that this movie had, and this is also jumping out a little bit on elements that this movie had. Is that just like the first Inside Out, most of the jokes kind of rely on how can I say visual gags or emotional gags. It's kind of like a movie that it kind of relies kind of like puns. Like for example, you see in this trailer, sarcasm. Bam, you got kind of like a big kind of a big hole, a big crater because it's a chasm. Sarcasm, get it? You're gonna get a few puns like that. Like for example, you're gonna get a pun at brainstorm. No, seriously, there's a pun on brainstorm, and of course, like you saw in the trailer, bottle emotions. Get it? Because you put emotions on a bottle and all this stuff. There are some others that they're there. Although I gotta admit that there are a few legit moments that I did kind of give it a laugh or a chuckle. Probably I will say that kind of like the best laugh that you're gonna get, which is when the emotions are bottled, they're put on a vault. Next to the Song of the South, but they find the hidden emotions some hidden elements that Riley kind of hide. One of them is kind of like this cartoon character, which is kind of a dog it looks like the love child between Blue from Blue's Clues and Peter Puppy from Earthworm Jim, which is basically the emotional representation of a cartoon character that Riley liked, which is a preschool cartoon, which is basically kind of like those preschool shows that treats children like idiots, like saying, "Hey, do you know? Do you know what I think about it? Do you know what they're gonna do and all this stuff?" And they, blanket the screen staringly, at the final fourth wall, and it's like, "Yeah, you did it." I also I love Anger's reaction. He's like, "What the hell are you doing?" I actually kind of love that. And then in the ball, they also showcase this PlayStation 1 character, which he is basically a JRPG character, with pink hair, long one, and which this Gus have kind of like a crush on. The problem with that JRPG character with PlayStation 1 graphics is that this character is lame. His power is just turning into a caterpillar ball and just roll, and everyone punts with it. And seriously, if someone gives you this is kind of like an indie game bullshit game that they give you. It's kind of like hilarious. And of course, they also showcase this big monstrous guy who is kind of like Riley's most deepest, darkest secret. But the funny thing about that guy is that he looks like the Darkness from that recent movie called Orion and the Darkness. He really looks like that. I don't know if it's a coincidence here and there, but he looks like that. Oh, and by the way, what is Riley's most deepest, darkest secret? They're gonna tell you on the post-credit scene. Yeah, there is a post-credit scene that it showcases what is that deep, dark secret. I'm not gonna tell you here, but you're gonna be the judge if it was worth it or not. But I'm still kind of mystified on how the deep, dark secret really looked like the Darkness from Orion and the Darkness. By the way, I haven't seen that movie, just in case. I saw the trailers, but man, that he looks so similar. But unfortunately, these three characters there aren't used too much. But I will say that this moment is probably my personal biggest laugh that I got during the whole movie. And what else I can say about this movie. Well, I will say that yeah, the message is there. I gotta say the message about the important keeping your emotions in check. Don't let not letting anxiety take over everything and take control over your life because well, it's gonna things get out of control and it kind of makes you turn kind of like that very selfish person and don't overthink about the future because honestly when you worry too much and you kind of you then tend to make kind of like big mistakes that's gonna affect your social kind of like your social circle and here and there and but at the same time just like Joy also learned is that sometimes when you're making your own self, it's it's not exactly also being a healthy thing that you are only thinking about your good traits. You're also made of your bad traits. That's what makes you you. Something like that is the best way I can describe. Uh, the movie is kind of something you're going through with that. Oh yeah, there's also one thing that I do want to kind of say that in which this movie also tries to quote unquote fix itself from the last movie. And here's the thing. And remember that in the first movie, one of the biggest complaints that I have from the first movie, well, mostly complaint, one more, not a complaint, more like nitpick. The biggest nitpick that I have with the movie is that it focused a little bit too much on joy and sadness. Although that was kind of like the point of the movie, but the other emotions like fear, anger, and disgust, they were kind of like used like a secondary character. They were treated like secondary characters. They kind of like it's just there and they just stay there. Funnily enough, this movie kind of does the opposite in a way, in which it comes to kind of like in a point in which the movie is like, you know what? I think that sadness already had too much. I did too much in the last movie, so let's make sadness separate from the group, and have Joy go into an adventure with the other person with the other personalities. Anger, disgust, and fear. So it's kind of trying to make up for the lack of relevance from with these characters with the last one. Oh yeah, I also kind of forgot that yeah, the world kind of expands a little bit more on the world inside. There's kind of like even worlds inside Riley's world. Like there is kind of like this, how can I say, friendship land, kind of like a friendship circle. And there's kind of there's even a world called Imagination Land, which is basically an animation studio, but very honestly, I got kind of a little bit of a bad taste on this one. The first reason, Imagination Land. It has the name of that awful trilogy of South Park. I don't care what people say. I hate that trilogy of that South Park episode. Imagination Land South Park is awful. I hate it. I don't care if people love it. I hate it. I hate that trilogy. And the other one is that Imagination Land is basically an animation studios, but very hypocritical out of both Disney and Pixar because it showcased a 2D animation studio with the people with the peg deck, making drawings, which is very hypocritical considering that Disney and Pixar don't do 2D animation. They stopped doing traditional animation. Okay, for the most part. I got a little bit offhand. Actually, there are a few people that are trying to revive that, but we haven't won the war yet. I saw the 90s birthday Donald Duck short, Do It Yourself Duck, which was hand drawn. That was really good. I totally respect that one. But I don't know. There was something about that moment that happened. But at the end of the day, it all kind of concrete. There's also, how can I say? Oh, here comes also that I do have a problem a bit. Is that the ending? It felt a little bit too safe. It's almost like the character wasn't punished for her actions. She needed some. She actually needed some kind of consequence, or kind of like some kind of harsh. How can I say? She needed something harsh, but nothing. Okay, maybe you could say that the character actually kind of had this moment in which she begins to hyperventilate, because I went through that episode. I went through panic attacks. I had kind of like this high anxiety that, of course, it's not healthy, but still, it's still considering what Riley was going through, that's still kind of like a white people problem. I mean, I don't know. I know that I am kind of harping to a problem that a 13-year-old character do, but again, some children at that age, they have bigger problems than Riley had. Some kids at that age, they get bullied, and honestly, this is where I think that the movie could have benefit, that instead of focusing on Riley, I think they should have focused a little bit more on another character. Let's see, kind of like another emotion, another kind of like a range of emotions of another character, but a character that actually goes through, well, more real life problems instead of, well, white people problems. And so yeah, the ending was a little bit, how can I say, too safe, and although for its good intentions that it has, and the more, even though I am nitpicking the freak out of this movie, I'm not mad. I did have kind of like a good time, and you know what? The funny thing is that I saw the audience. Most of the audience that I watched, they were mostly adults. I saw only like kind of like 5 or 6 children, which ironically it made kind of like the most well behaved kind of like audience I had in a movie that is for family friendly audience, and that's and probably they're gonna get this audience now that reviews are getting kind of like lukewarm and saying that, hey, it's good and all this stuff. Yeah, it's good. I'm not saying, I'm not kind of, how can I say, I'm not gonna deny that. It's just that, well, I don't like to overhype things, and if there's problem with the movie, I gotta address it. But that doesn't diminish it from what it is. Although, yeah, the more this, I think that maybe it was a kind of like a right call that this movie should have been kind of like a one-off instead. And if there's gonna be a tune-off, then it should have been more like an anthology, which also kind of begins to, ask some questions. Like, for example, if those new emotions of Riley comes from, then where are those emotions from, the adult perspective? The adult perspective is gonna have even more of those emotions, and it's not that emotions disappear out of the blue. Even as an adult, they can also feel bored or embarrassed, and at the same time, there's some other new ones that sometimes some of them are not exactly positive. Like I say, that envy and anxiety is not exactly one of them. There's also malice. Malice is also an emotion. There's despair. There is, how can I say, depression. Although that's more, that's kind of like a sadness going through extremes. There's pain. There is scratches. Oh yeah, there's also poop. Ugh. I gotta go to the bathroom.